Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I will be wrapping up the books I read in January. I read 12 books in January and I'm not really in the mood to review 12 books today, so I think I'll just split it in half, and maybe in the future I will stick to like reviewing 5 or 6 books after I read them, rather than do the monthly wrap-ups. I don't know yet, we'll see how this goes. So this will be the first 6 books I read in January, and then I'll do the next 6 books another time. So the first book I finished in January was the Christmas Chronicles by Nigel Slater. This is actually a book I read mostly during November and December. Because it's a great book to read a little bit every day, but then I had to return it to the library at the beginning of January, so the last part I read a bit quicker. This is a book that combines recipes but also diary entries and essays all about the winter period. So for every day starting at the beginning of November through to the end of January, the author shares some thoughts about what he's doing that day, but also memories from wintertime, especially around food, cooking, gardening, and just everything related to Christmas. So things like getting a Christmas tree, sending out Christmas cards, making the Christmas cake, visiting Christmas markets in Germany, what food he's making in a day, what he sees in nature or in his garden when he's outside. It's a very cozy book. Nigel Slater mentions that winter is his favorite season, and he definitely brings out this joy and warmth of a time that it can be quite bleak often. Yeah, I love how his love for the winter season really shines through in this book, and it points out that even the like dreariest of days can bring something comforting. So yeah, I think that is a great book to pick up and read a bit every day during the winter season. Then I read Januari by Alfred, Birney. This is another installment of the Months series that I've talked about it before, that a Dutch small publisher brings out a small novella by a different author each month, where they write about a different month. And I'm finding more and more that I like the concept more than the actual stories. Like this one again, it was fine when I was reading it, but I'm actually struggling to remember what it was about right now. I'll continue reading them each month because they are short and they are all from different authors, so you know, the next one might be one that I do enjoy. And they are included in a subscription of ebooks I have, so I get them anyway. So yeah, I don't have much more to say on that one. And then the third book I read in January was Atonement by McEwan. This was a book that I read for a book club that I might join. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't feeling well on the day of the book club, so I didn't end up going, but I still read the book. I first read this, I think maybe 15 years or so ago, and I really liked it back then, so I was curious to see what I thought of it now. So this book is written in 3 parts, and the first part starts in the middle of the summer of 1935. And we meet Birney. You know, she's quite a petulant 13-year-old girl who has this really vivid imagination, which is great in a way because she loves writing stories, and at the beginning of the book she's putting up a play, but sometimes her imagination gets away from her, and you know, she's putting stories on things she sees, even if she doesn't really know what's going on, especially some things she sees her sister doing with a family friend who's around often. And in this way, one thing leads to another thing in her mind, and she ends up falsely accusing Robbie, the family friend, of assaulting her 15-year-old cousin. So that's what happens in the first part. And then in the second part, we move to the Second World War, and we follow Robbie, who was stationed as a soldier in Belgium. And we basically see him making his way back to Dunkirk, where he is hoping to be evacuated back to England. And then in the last part we go back to Birney, who's now training as a nurse in a London hospital, where she soon will have to treat injured soldiers. So that is like a brief overview of the plot. And I loved the first part of this novel. I really enjoyed reading about Bryony as a character. She's very unlikable, she's very annoying, but so well portrayed. I think the way Ian McEwan laid out this character, how she loves storytelling, how she wants the world to be just so. And if she can't quite make sense of what she sees, she'll just fill in the gaps with her own imagination, and how all of this is foreboding and setting up for what's going to happen. I love the atmosphere of it, the setting of the house, this oppressive heat in the summer, and this sense of boredom and anticipation that hangs around the house. It's all just this tiny bit unsettling. So I love the first part, but then the second and the third part I didn't enjoy as much. Maybe it's because I wasn't interested in Robbie as a character, so that whole second part to me felt like a bit of a slug. And by the time we got back to Bryony and her story, I was already a bit bored, and I felt like she was still an annoying character by the third part, but then a lot less interesting than she was in the first part. So yeah, it was a bit of a shame because I did really enjoy that first part a lot, and I wish the author could have kept me more engaged through the entire book. So yeah, that was Atonement by Ian McEwan. Next I read The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Deesha Philyaw, and I really loved this short story collection. Whenever I try to tell you what this collection is about, I have to be careful not to just say this is about the secret lives of church ladies, because that is in essence what this book is about. Each of these stories is about a girl or a woman who is either an active participant in their local church or very closely connected to someone who is. And in these stories we see the sides of their lives that they would not share in their church or in their community. We see a more vulnerable side, a more seductive side, a more messy side. You know, we see them exploring a side of themselves which is private, a bit shameful, but also gives them joy in a myriad of ways. And what I loved in this collection is that all of the characters in these stories are so memorable, even though you only spend a short amount of time with them. You know, they instantly stick to you, and they feel very complete and complex. You know, when I go through the titles of these stories, I remember all of them, which is something that I rarely get with short story collections. Obviously, some of these stories are dealt with more than others, but there is no duds in this book. Every story in here is good, and I would highly recommend if you are looking to read some short stories. Then I read my favorite book of the month, and that is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. This is a book that was and still is incredibly hyped. And I am usually a bit apprehensive of hype books, but then sometimes everyone is just right. And I could be annoyed with myself for not reading it sooner. But I decided to look at it from a different perspective, and I figured great books will be great books still, even if I read them later on. So The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet is a proper science fiction novel set on a spaceship with alien species and all that. We meet Rosemary Parker, who joins the crew of the Wayfarer. And the Wayfarer is a spaceship that is used to punch tunnels between different points in the galaxy, that can be used as a sort of road between places. And very soon the spaceship is offered a very lucrative job to build a tunnel to a distant planet. And we follow the crew of the Wayfarer as they take on this job. And what I loved in this book is basically why I picked Still Life by Sarah Winman as my favorite book of last year. You know, premise-wise, these two books could not be farther apart. But in this book, we also follow this mishmash group of characters that have a very close relationship to each other because they have this history together. I loved getting to know these characters and how they all relate to each other, where they all came from. And because these are characters from different planets and they aren't all human, there is lots of space to explore different costumes and different cultures, and the different species have different views on things like relationships and love and the way gender and sexuality works. And I don't read a lot of science fiction, but if I do, it's this kind of sci-fi that I enjoy. I don't like sci-fi where they get very much into the science part of things. Like, I don't care how this ship punches holes through space, but I like that the genre allows for a lot of speculation, and it allows for space to think about the possibilities beyond what we know as humans on Earth. And what I really enjoyed as well is reading about the small day-to-day things, like reading what it's like to live on a spaceship, you know, what the spaceship looks like, where they sleep, what food they eat, and stuff like that. So plot-wise, there's definitely some twists and turns to keep the momentum going, but it is absolutely the characters and the connection to each other and how they develop that is at the heart of this novel. I absolutely fell in love with them, and I was laughing and crying with them during the course of this book. It's a very queer, positive, heartwarming, hopeful kind of story, but also sad and emotional. Yeah, I just had a really great time all the way through. And then the last book I want to talk about today is the book Smugglers by Anna James. This is the fourth book in the Book Wanderers series, which is a middle grade fantasy series, and I listened to this on audio. So this is the fourth book in a series, so I can't really get into the plot. The premise of the series is that the main character, Tilly, is a book wanderer, and A book wanderer is someone who can travel into books, and in this series she just basically gets into different adventures with her friends. I think these are great on audio. The narrator does a really excellent job, and for me these are just the kind of books to enjoy when I want something a bit more light and doesn't require a lot of headspace. They're just fun, low stakes, adventurous books with a bit of tension, but you know, you still know they're gonna end well. And they're about books. So I enjoyed these while they last, and you know, I already forgotten most of what happens, but that's okay. So that's it. That's the first books I've read in January. I think it was a pretty excellent start of the reading year. I especially loved The Secret Lives of Church Ladies and The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. Both of these could end up on my favorites of the year list at the end of 2023. If you have any thoughts on these books, please leave them down below. And I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.